In this lesson, we're going to talk about one of my favorite features of Spring MVC, and that's data binding. Data binding really simplifies how we handle form processing. Let's turn to our application to talk a little bit more about what data binding does. If we go to the Projects option within our menu and click on Add, we will get the form to add a new project. This form will allow us to specify the values that will be used in the parameters that we send over in the request. That request is going to come over to the server side, and it's going to get processed by our controller handler method. It's going to get hit by the save project method that we have mapped to the /add URL and the post method. Once we receive that request, what we'd really like to do is look at each of those parameter values and pull them out and then create a project object. Normally, we would do this by calling request.getParameter, and we would pull out, let's say, the name or maybe the name of the sponsor, and then we would set that field on the project. Spring makes this much easier with its data binding capabilities. We're going to modify our save project method by just adding an argument of type project with the name project. And at this point, we'll need to change our code up a little because we're no longer passing in those arguments being used by our controller method. And we're also going to remove these two other controller methods that attempt to handle the form submission just to keep things simple. We have a controller method that accepts an argument of type project. What we need to do is add the model attribute annotation to this argument in our controller method. Now, what will happen is when we submit our form, Spring will look at the name of each parameter, and it will match that parameter name to a field within the project class. And then it's going to assign that value for the request parameter to the field with the corresponding name. If we were to just add a little bit of debugging in here, I'm going to, within our set method for our name, just put in something like Spring MVC data binding in action. We will actually see Spring invoking the setName method when it's performing data binding, and it will kick out that logging to our console. We can also add a toString method here. This will give us some great debugging output. So if you just right-click within the class, and then go to Source, Generate toString, we can create a toString method that prints out the value of each of our fields. We can go back to our project controller. Within our project controller, we can just write our project to the console, so that will invoke the toString method. Let's restart our server. So just go to the Servers tab, right-click, hit Restart. Now we're going to attempt to submit a new project through our form. So I'm going to scroll back up, and I'll just hit the Add button again. And now we're going to type in the name of a project. So let's say Spring Course. We're going to make it a single-year project. Our sponsor will be Infinite Skills. We'll be authorized to spend $10,000, 1,000 hours, and this is a simple spring course. We will also say that it is a special project. Now we're going to submit our form. And if we go back and we look at our console output, you can see that Spring MVC data binding in action, that string we printed out to the console, was printed when Spring hit that setter method to create our new project object. And then we also see we print out all of the fields on the project. Now what you will notice is that some of these fields are null. What that is caused by is a mismatch between the field name and the parameter name on the form. There we see authorized hours is null, the description is null, as well as authorized funds. Let's go back and we will correct those on the project add.jsp file within our form. We can go down and we know that on the project object, authorized funds is actually authorized and then uppercase F funds. Now our parameter name that we're going to submit will match what is on the project fields. The same thing occurs with hours. And here we see in the description, we're just neglecting to provide a name attribute, which will wind up being the name of our parameter. And we need to specify that as description. Now, if we were to restart our application and head back to the project form, we can now begin to fill out our form to submit a new project. I'm just going to go with new project as the name, and we'll make it a single year project. Our sponsor will once again be Infinite Skills. We'll authorize $1,000 and 1,000 hours, and then we'll just give a simple description. We will mark it as a special project, and then we will submit. Once we submit the form, we'll head back to STS. If we look at our console, you can see that we have now populated all of the fields except for the project ID, which we wouldn't expect to do from the user interface. We have the description, we also have the authorized hours and the authorized funds. We were able to successfully data bind a project object using our project form. The approach we took in this lesson was just to use regular HTML with the name attribute. As we'll see in later lessons, there is actually an entire Spring tag library that will support this type of data binding so that we will not need to specify our own name attributes, and we get a little bit of assistance there from Spring.